Thank you. Yes.
Brian Wheeler, BBC. I'm just intrigued by the use of the word fair in your slogan. Obviously Labour and the Liberal Democrats also use this word, and I just wondered if you're going to be in danger of being kind of drowned out by that, and also kind of fair for who? It doesn't seem very fair on drivers or people who enjoy cheap foreign holidays or drinkers. I mean, there's a lot of...
Caroline, do you want to talk about the policies that back up our fairness slogan?
Yes, I mean, I don't want to get into a competition about who thought of the word fair first, but I would point out that we have been talking about it for a lot longer than, in terms of our manifesto slogan and so forth, than the other parties. It's important for us to be talking about fairness because it's not that we're downplaying the environmental side of our policies, but people know about our environmental policies. They know that we have the most ambitious policies when it comes to tackling the climate crisis, for example. What they want to know is what the rest of our manifesto looks like. And so that's why, for us, talking about social justice is just as important as talking about environmental justice. In many ways, they're absolutely linked. And in terms to answer your question more directly, I mean, in pure cash terms, as Brian outlined, that you may well be paying more to drive your car, but you'll be probably paying a lot less in tax, that there are a whole range of measures like the free insulation, like the free prescription charges, like the social care based on the Scottish model, like the pension proposals. These are basically making a fairly significant redistribution to 87% of people who are going to be better off under these proposals. And so although it's possible to pick out one thing and say, yes, if you like drinking 10 bottles of whiskey a week, then you're going to be worse off, and I apologise. But overall, there are plenty of very positive policies that will mean that we think that, as I say, 87% of people will be better off under these proposals.
Thank you. More questions? Yes.
What would you say on the doorstep to somebody who has been a floating voter and perhaps voted Tory before and in 1997 voted Labour, but now is disenchanted with both the main parties and think they'll try something different and they'll vote Lib Dem? What would you say to them? Why should they vote for you rather than trying something different for Lib Dem?
Are we talking about Brighton or anywhere?
Brighton or anywhere.
I mean, in Brighton, the answer is extraordinarily simple because the Lib Dems are not going to be in the running for winning the seat here, and the Greens absolutely are. And so if you were weighing up Liberal Democrat policies versus Green policies, although there is some shared concerns, obviously, around fairness and around the Green agenda, if you want the real thing, then you can afford to vote for the real thing here in Brighton because we're well ahead in the polls. We're ahead of all the other parties in the polls in Brighton. The Lib Dems are fourth. And so it's a very practical proposition to say that if those are the things you care about, if a balanced parliament is what you care about, then the best way to get it is by voting Green.
And in all three seats, the Liberal Democrats are a contender. In Lewisham Deptford, they only have 2 councillors in the entire parliamentary constituency compared to the Greens' 6. They're not a force on the ground in the way that we are, and it's the same in Norwich, isn't it, Adrian?
Yes, absolutely. In Norwich South, the Lib Dem voters collapsed, and we've won the vast majority of the seats they held within the Norwich South constituency. We've got 6 former Lib Dem councillors backing us because they can see that having Greens in Parliament is going to have more of an impact than just one more person on the Lib Dem benches. So if people value having diversity within Parliament, if people want to have fresh ideas in there, we need to have Greens in the next Parliament. We've got a great chance of achieving that in our strongest parts of the country at this election. And there are so many issues where Greens will provide a different approach to the Lib Dems. So we're the ones opposing privatisation in public services, for example. We're the ones saying we want to localise our economy, so we'll create skilled manufacturing jobs for the future and more jobs in farming. We're very distinctive on these things. We need Greens in there holding the other parties to account.
Gary again.
I think I'm right in saying, Adrian, that support nuclear power. Now, obviously, the non-nuclear future is central to the environmental policies that the Green Party promotes. It's a bit like having a federalist as deputy leader of UKIP, isn't it?
I don't support nuclear power, and I never have done.
Yeah, but one of your candidates does. I apologise, one of your candidates does, doesn't it?
1 out of 320, I think, something like that. Yeah.
I mean, seriously, I mean, there's been a lot of manufactured horror that one person out of the total Green Party has a different view on one issue, where he has pledged that he will, on the stump, talk about what is Green Party policy first and then admit that his own personal view is something different. I mean, you show me a political party where absolutely everybody believes on every single policy, and I'll buy you a drink.
Yes, we'll go. Yes.
Caroline, just wondering how successful successful you think after today the Green Party will be in shaking off that single issue image, which I know is quite important?
It's hugely important, and let me just keep stressing that's not to say that we're not passionate about the environment. We are and we always will be, and that's at the heart of our proposals. But it is important to be able to demonstrate that we have policies right across the board. Places where people have seen green councillors in action, like Brighton or indeed London or Oxford or Norwich, when we've got councillors on the ground, people can see that we're the ones, for example, who are campaigning for the new school or opposing the closure of the hospital or promoting better public transport. They know that, but in many parts of the country where we still don't have those councillors, then it's immensely important to keep stressing this point, as I said before, in a sense that social justice and environmental justice are linked, and that we do have and always have had progressive proposals on everything from education to health, from defence to the economy. And I think that by positioning ourselves with that fair is worth fighting for, by making that a really central part of our message this time around, we hope very much to get across the message that if people do want a party that is serious about addressing inequality, that is serious about many of the values that perhaps people assumed still associated with the Labour Party until they became New Labour and forgot many of those original principles, then there is a party out there that stands for all of those things, and increasingly at this election is electable, and there's a real chance of us getting into Westminster as well.
You do talk about that yawning gap. How big do you see it as being now that Labour has drifted towards the middle, trying to capture that tricky middle ground?
I think that gap is huge. I mean, in so many ways, the three main parties are fairly indistinguishable. Yes, I know in the media we have to manufacture big differences about exactly when they're going to start cutting, in terms when it comes to cutting public spending, for example. But where is the voice that is actually saying there's a different way forward? You might not agree with it, but at least to have the debate about saying we could do this in a different way, and to get different ideas and new ideas. When you've got all of the parties basically seeing a greater role for the market in the delivery of public services, where is the party that's saying, that we would like to keep public services public, that we would like to renationalise the railways because we believe that public transport should be a public service, not being run for profit, for example. And so I think there is a real appetite out there for people who want to see those values and want to see a party that can have the courage to put them forward still, and to have a chance of being elected. And here in Brighton Pavilion, it's been honestly quite a moving experience when people have read the manifesto, if they've seen the stuff we're saying on the on the website, and they come up to us, and there's a real feeling of homecoming. It's like, hurrah, there's somebody out there who is saying this stuff that I can join with, because there are so many people who are disaffected out there, and they're disaffected not just because of the expenses scandals and all of the sleaze that we've seen in recent years, but also disaffected because they feel that a whole set of ideas is no longer being represented on the political spectrum, and I think that's where we have a real role.
Thanks. We'll go to the back.
George Jones from the Press Association. Do you effectively now see yourself as a left-wing party, that you effectively replaced what would have been seen as the traditional Labour Party with your policies now on taxation, nationalisation of the NHS?
Caroline?
Well, I would say a party of the left plus. I mean, we are not just trying to become a reflection of what Labour once was. Not at all. We're taking some of those best values around tackling inequality, around redistribution, around social justice, around fairness. But critically, what we're doing is putting it into a completely different kind of economic framework, because what we recognise is that it's not just how you redistribute the proceeds of growth, it's how you build the cake, the economic cake in the first place. In other words, how you look at production and consumption, how you put genuine economic concern, not just bolted on to the edge of business as usual, as I'm afraid most of the other parties are still doing, but to put that right at the centre of all of your policies, which has radical implications for the way you run your economy, as Adrian was talking about, the relocalisation of the economy. That is miles away from anything Labour has ever said, really. So it's about those values, but it's about linking that to this passionate concern about ensuring that sustainability, making sure that we have a planet into the future, is at the heart.
Aren't you in danger of losing your unique selling point from the green, environmental, to becoming kind of campaigning party on social justice, and that in the end you're becoming sort of too much like the other party?
Well, I would say absolutely not. We're not coming like the other parties, because I've just spent the last 5 or 10 minutes explaining about how no other party does actually uphold the values that we're talking about when it comes to that space on the left. But also, I think, if you are talking about how we tackle the enormous environmental challenges that we face, then that does mean looking at the way we run our economy.